Well, good evening, everyone. Again, Councilmember Villalobos for District 4. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening for the City of Kyle's first virtual open house about the proposed Public Safety Center. We will host 4 more panels or events after tonight, and each with the same presentation to provide opportunities for every Kyle resident to get more information and have the questions answered about Proposition A. Allow me to begin our presentation by clarifying my role here today. I'm not here to advocate for or against the bond. However, I can provide factual information and answer your questions about Proposition A. The City of Kyle is committed to service, community, and innovation. We support the city and all departments in attracting, developing, and retaining a highly qualified and diverse workforce. We want to share more information about the Proposition A and public safety needs of our growing population. Kyle is a growing city, and as the community grows, our public safety needs grow. I'm going to play back a quick video that talks a little bit more about where we are.
Did you know that the City of Kyle population has grown from about 6,000 residents to more than 52,000 residents in the last 20 years? And did you know that the Kyle Police Department is currently understaffed and spread thin across 3 different facilities, including an old bank building with officers working out of bank vaults? This was always intended to be a temporary solution. In fact, efforts to house the Kyle PD in a single location date back to 2011. As our community grows, our public safety needs grow too. That's why Kyle City Council has called for Proposition A $37 million bond election to fund a new public safety center. If voters pass Proposition A on Tuesday, November 3rd, the city would be able to finance the design and construction of a new public safety center to serve residents for the next 20 years. This project could begin construction in spring 2021 and be completed in roughly 14 months. It's important to note that in light of COVID-19, the city would also be deferring the tax rate impact, meaning residents wouldn't see the estimated $13 a month increase until October 2021. A new public safety center would have dedicated space to expand police department services and potentially improve emergency response times, pursue accreditation, and increase officer training. Fully staff the department with additional mental health professionals, trauma support services, a K-9 unit, and additional sworn officers. Expand community engagement programs. And build out an emergency operations center where the city could collaborate with surrounding authorities during critical times, such as natural disasters, community-wide security threats, or even pandemics like COVID-19. This public safety center is an investment in our community. To learn more about Proposition A or how a new public safety center will help address the safety needs of our growing population, visit cityofkyle.com/bond.
Well, as you can see, the need for the new public safety facility has existed for a long time. And while the unprecedented situation with COVID-19 has impacted everyone in the Kyle and beyond, it has also reinforced the need for a dedicated space for the city to provide public safety services to our residents. Initial discussions about the need for a new public safety facility dated back to 2011, when the needs assessment of the City of Kyle Department, the City of Kyle's Police Department was first conducted by Brinkley Sargent Architects. A follow-up study was conducted by Brinkley Sargent Architects in 2019, which updated the projected facility needs for the police department by 2029 and 2039. These studies looked only at facility requirements for the police department and did not take into the account the additional square footage to establish an emergency operations center or any space required to support the additional public safety services provided by the city. In addition to the police department needs, analysis we heard from the community that the public safety needs were an important concern throughout the Future of Kyle 2020 Community Survey. That was conducted earlier this year. One of the things I heard was that with the construction of the police facility was one of the top priorities for the respondents in the next budget year was the police department. We also heard that over 90% of the respondents agreed to the traffic law enforcement is extremely or somewhat important. Finally, 98% of the respondents believe that the crime prevention and deterrence is extremely or somewhat important. With all of that data collected about Kyle's growing public safety needs, going back to 2011, City Council voted to call a $37 million bond election on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020, which seeks voter approval for the Proposition A to finance the construction of a public safety center that will support our growing community. It is important to note that in light of COVID-19, the city would be deferring the tax impact until October 2021 as a part of the city's fiscal year 2022 budget, meaning that if passed, committee members wouldn't see their property tax increase for more than a year. As part of the planning that took place before calling the bond election on August 17th, the city formed a task force in 2018 to officially begin the process of researching and designing a public safety center for consideration of bond funding. The task force is made up of representatives from the city, police department, and the community. After extensive research of the facilities in other municipalities, task force identified the police headquarters in College Station, shown here, and in New Braunfels' ideal model for Kyle proposed public safety center. Both facilities were designed by the architecture from PGAL, and in early 2020, the council approved the funding for a contract with PGAL to begin customizing an existing design for the proposed public safety center. Using the existing facility design provided by the city with an opportunity to expedite the design process, and if passed by voters in November, the design would be finalized. Construction could begin in spring of 2021, meaning being dig ready. You've been hearing one use of the term public safety center a lot this evening. So what exactly does that mean? The Kyle Public Safety Center would be a facility dedicated to serving the public safety needs of our community. In an effort to avoid another temporary facility for the police department, the proposed 64,000 square foot, 2-story building would provide space to fully staff the police department in a single location, with room to grow over 20 years. Our public safety needs go beyond the police department, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But let me start off by taking you through what the proposed facility would include for our PD. The proposed public safety center would be located on Marketplace Avenue at Kohler's Crossing in the Uptown development. The location is marked on this slide with the red star. Compared to the current headquarters, the proposed location would increase access across the city with the potential for more efficient response times by removing the immediate proximity to the train tracks and offering access to the east side of Kyle via 1626, south and north Kyle via I-35. Additionally, the 6-acre site would be donated to the city by the developer of Plum Creek, which equates to more than $700,000 in land savings for taxpayers. As I previously mentioned, the Kyle PD is currently understaffed. As our population grows, the gap continues to grow. The proposed public safety center would allow the city to fully staff the police department at the recommended ratio of 1.5 officers per 1,000 of residents. Specifically, there would be space to bring in more community engagement staff as well as additional mental health and trauma support specialists. In the proposed public safety center, there would be an investigation suite that offered additional privacy and can accommodate victims or residents experiencing trauma as a result of crime. In the current headquarters, the evidence room is nearly full. However, the police department is legally required to store certain evidence for decades, and the space needed will only grow with our growing population. In the proposed public safety center, there would be additional space to store and protect evidence as well as in-house crime evidence lab. The proposed facility also allow the police department to pursue accreditation from the Law Enforcement Recognition Program through the Texas Police Chiefs Association, as well as the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, which opens up opportunities for Kyle Police Department to pursue various grants that would further improve recruitment, training, and public safety services to our community. Accreditation from CALIA provides greater accountability within the agency, and increased community advocacy through a set of standards that clearly defines authority, performance, and responsibilities. The proposed Public Safety Center would also provide dedicated space to expand community-based programs like the Citizens Police Academy and the Citizens on Patrol, which connected the police department with the residents it serves. The city would also be able to offer new programs and services for residents that the current police headquarters cannot support, such as Youth Explore programs and Neighborhood Watch program meetings. As I mentioned before, our public safety needs go beyond the police department, and the proposed facility would provide dedicated space for the city to establish an emergency operations center. An emergency operations center, or EOC, would allow better collaboration between the city of Kyle and the surrounding counties and the authorities during the critical times. EOCs established the Central Command Center for all public safety services, police, fire, EMS, and local leadership, to collect and analyze data, make strategic and operational decisions to protect the community during emergencies. Emergencies often addressed in an EOC include, but are not limited to, weather-related natural disasters, community-wide security threats, such as school shootings or hostage situations, major traffic accidents on I-35, or even pandemics like COVID-19. In addition to establishing an EOC and providing room for the police department to grow over the next 20 years, the Public Safety Center would also provide immediate temporary space for the ancillary public safety functions, including IT, communications, city administration, until this police department requires the full building. The proposed bond, Proposition A, is estimated to cost approximately $37 million. If passed, the city anticipates raising the property tax by an estimated 7 cents per $100 of evaluation during the 20-year life cycle of these general obligation bonds. That means that the average property owner with $216,000 home with the city of Kyle would see their property tax increase approximately $13.50 per month, or about $160.50 per year. As a reminder, in light of COVID-19, the city would be deferring the tax rate impact until October 2021. When you head to the polls, you'll see this official language on the ballot. What this ballot language means is that if it's passed, the funding from the proposed bond would finance the design, construction, equipping the Public Safety Center that would open in 2022 and serve residents for decades to come. This bond is an investment in our community. Here are a few important dates to remember. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Early voting takes place from October 13th to the 30th of October. The last day to register to vote is October 5th. That's very important. To register or apply for a ballot by mail, visit the Hays County Government Center or the elections office online. You can also find all polling locations and hours on our website at cityofkyle.com/bond. On the screen, we have a slide with important information about additional open houses we're hosting. Spanish interpretation will also be available during next week's open house. We hope that you'll encourage your neighbors to attend any of the following events or watch a recording. On this slide, you can see the link for our bond webpage, cityofkyle.com/bond, as well as the bond hotline phone number and email. Please reach out to our team with any questions or feedback that you may have. They're waiting and they're willing to answer those questions and guide you to the right locations. Before we begin the Q&A, the portion of this building, of this evening, I want to emphasize that the proposed bond package for the Public Safety Center, Proposition A, reflects the city's commitment to the proper and efficient progress of Kyle, which is part of our city charter. And our city charter is kind of like our Constitution, which guides us on major issues. The proposed facility would allow the city to increase its public safety services to support our growing population. This is an investment in our community. Thank you all so much for tuning into this event. With that, we will now begin the Q&A. As Sarah mentioned earlier, you can leave your questions or comments in the Q&A feature of our webinar. We will reach out and read each question out loud along with our answer. If a question is repeated we will acknowledge that it has already been answered.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Villalobos, and thank you all who are leaving your questions in the Q&A already. We've gotten a couple questions, Councilmember, about what's actually included in the bond itself. What kind of construction is included? Could you talk a little bit more about, is it just going to be this one building? Will it tie into the infrastructure of the city? Talk a little bit more about what's included in the bond package.
Well, it's a $37 million bond. The purpose of it is for planning, designing, constructing, and improving and equipping the public safety facility, specifically a new police station and emergency operations center, and then to levy a tax that we have delayed to October 2021. Of course, the building in and of itself will tie into the infrastructure, the current traffic infrastructure that's currently underway. We feel like with the infrastructure in place and with the location, it provides the best location for the police department to respond in all areas of the city of Kyle.
Great. And I know you mentioned this during the presentation, but we got a question about what other departments will be housed in the new building. We know it's the IT, communications, and city administration until the police department requires that full building. Anything else you can add to that?
I believe also code enforcement and also animal control will be over to that location as well, along with the consolidation of all of the entire City of Kyle Police Department under one roof, which is a huge undertaking, and also provides the opportunity for those critical departments to collaborate on many different aspects of law enforcement, public safety, and overall code enforcement.
Great. Okay, one of the other questions we got that I know you addressed in the presentation as well, and we dropped in an answer here on the Q&A, but I want to make sure we read the question out loud for folks, is this facility is several $1 million more than the study that was done. What's included in this bond package that maybe wasn't accounted for in that original study?
Well, I believe one of the main things that we had discussed within the presentation was COVID-19 really enforced the necessity for a lot of different programs, right? And a lot of different resource needs. One of those was emergency management. Emergency management being a critical part of responding to very critical incidents across the city, whether it's a weather-related incident, whether it's an active shooter incident, whether it's any major traffic issues, or the pandemic. But also, one of the most important things that we felt like that we didn't engage was the increasing in the availability of space and room for training our community, engaging our community in curriculum and training programs to create ambassadors of our department, but also to teach people how to be safe, how to prevent crime. And furthermore, address an Explorers program that we feel like really engages our community, not just young individuals in our city, but also their families, and to have that space to engage that. So I think the other items is having IT there, increasing their footprint there also not only engages the important security measures and resources needed for a law enforcement department and the public safety center to operate, but also provides them the wherewithal and the resources and the space needed for them to function and take on all of the projects throughout the city. I think those are all critical things that I believe that the original assessment did not address.
Absolutely. And you mentioned
And I think, talking from a law enforcement perspective, there are critical needs for law enforcement personnel to ensure that not only are they being provided with the space that they need to address their well-being, their fitness, but also the safety of their families, and having locations to store their equipment, to be able to take care of themselves before they leave their work and go home. So these are all different things that I think come into play on this particular facility. They're very important to the city and also very important to public safety.
Thank you. You mentioned in your response just now that EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and we do have a couple questions in our Q&A about that. Can you talk a little bit about how an EOC might have benefited the city during COVID-19? What could the city have gotten out of having that? And then can you also talk about what would happen if they're during non-emergency times? What will that EOC be used for?
Okay, so in the middle of a disaster declaration or an incident that may happen throughout the city, what that does is allows a complete and total collaboration with resources around. Typically, large events for the EOC would help garner resources, law enforcement partners, first responders, responding partners throughout our entire region. Should there be a wildland fire, that could be used to coordinate and facilitate services where those responders are coming from in a more efficient manner, making sure that the closest responders are being dispatched to those locations, but then also monitoring all of the administrative pieces that it takes to ensure that we are addressing all the financial needs, all of the recuperation needs of our first responder, utilizing technology to ensure that we're tracking information appropriately when we are continuing to address those types of incidents. There's quite a bit of administrative work that goes into place that allows all of that to be consolidated under one system, viewable, so that we can ensure that we're tracking those things, but it's also information that is tracked that can be provided and updated real time to the assets that are out in the field in the middle of that response. It's critical when you have multi-agencies responding to an incident, that the information is consistent, the information is timely, and that we are ensuring that we're providing the resources for the highest probability of success for an incident. During the off times, emergency management never turns off. Emergency management goes into a planning mode and a training mode. Those opportunities for planning are all about administering emergency management plans, active shooter plans, traffic safety plans in lieu of events that may be coming to Kyle or around Kyle, to divert those things out. That allows a repository for officials to be there, to share and collaborate data, and then also to broadcast that data using technology to all of those other facilities, and even to our mobile units that are out in the field, meaning hearing live cameras from our police officers out in the field, or our firefighters out in the field, or if there are going to be any kind of satellite incident management location set up in the field, we are collaborating with them and moving in a real time response and sharing of information. As we all know, seconds means lives. Second means safety. And the more we consolidate and the more we become more efficient, and we have all of those particular departments under one roof to be able to respond in an efficient and a timely manner, the better we are equipped to take care of the citizens of Kyle and all of the visitors that come through the city of Kyle. So I think I've answered the emergency management piece and the training piece, and then also just overall meeting for a lot of planning that takes place in city government. There's a tremendous amount that takes place. A lot of these things start off years prior to the actual fruition of projects. And an EOC will allow communication ports. It will allow radio communications. It'll facilitate ham radio operations when digital services are down. It'll allow us to see things real time on video. It'll allow us to monitor news. It would allow us to monitor weather. and then also allow us to continue to facilitate all the administrative pieces that will be visible for everyone to utilize in a situation such as emergency management, planning, and then also training. So whenever you have an incident and you do quite a bit of planning for that particular incident, should it happen, well, there has to come much of the training before those things come. And training in the environment that's going to be utilized to respond to an incident is critical, so that you're familiar with how everything works, how everything operates, and then also giving those particular responders and those staff the ability to ensure that we are updating, upgrading, maintaining all of the equipment and their ability to respond. So along with equipment comes computers and printers and all types of other equipment that come into play when you're responding to an incident. So definitely training is something that we'll probably find ourselves in the middle of to ensure that we are planning appropriately and respond. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm going to switch gears now because we're getting a few questions about the tax rate impact. We had one question: the tax rate increase is only for 20 years and then the bond is paid off. Can you talk a little bit more about the tax rate impact?
Well, you'll see that the tax rate impact on the bond is a slight increase. And yes, when the 20 years does come into fruition, that the bond will be paid off based on the tax rate that's been put into place. The city of Kyle, we're talking about, with the increase of valuation, will increase to 54 cents per $100 valuation on that bond for 20 years until the bond is completely paid.
Thank you. And then just another tax-related question: will the actual estimated amount paid on our taxes go up as our home values go up?
Well, the more that we have residents that come in and we continue to move, so we've all experienced tremendous amount of growth in the city of Kyle. So the more that the residents that continue to grow and move into the city of Kyle will spread the liability of paying this bond off, which could remain, which would help the overall burden of paying those taxes over the period of time that we have this bond. Now, if we were to remain at the current growth rate and nothing would change, and the continuation of the value of our properties go up, then yes, I would suspect that would be the case. But with the record growth and the continued growth of the city, we're going to have other residents moving in that will also participate in paying, which would mitigate the increase of taxes over a period of time.
Thank you, Councilmember. We are getting a few questions about response time and how the new location might benefit response times moving forward. Can you talk a little bit more about response times for us?
Well, it's response times are critical, and I think that one of the barriers, or one of the items that we have seen over the period of time in our current location has been the railroad tracks. And I have seen myself, and I know that others have seen, and constituents and voters have provided information and concerns about, how do we address the issue of the railroad tracks when you see officers that are stopped at the railroad tracks, in the middle of a response. So in our research, in our site selection, that is one of the main things that we've anticipated in looking at this particular location. This location will allow access to 35, very quick access to 35. It would allow us to access north and south of the city of Kyle, and then also east and west. So without the barrier of the railroad tracks. So then on top of that, you also have a department or a facility that would be able to house an increase of staffing within the organization. As our city grows, our public safety needs grow. And when we reach the point where we have a full staffing, you're also looking at the idea that those response times will decrease.
Thank you, Councilmember. We've also gotten a couple questions. I mentioned earlier about the building and the construction of the new public safety center. And you may not have this information, and that's okay. For anybody who maybe we don't answer your question this evening, if we can't get to all of them, we do encourage you to email us with those. But Councilmember, are you able to talk a little bit about what levels of LEED certification the city might be seeking for the construction of this facility?
I don't. I know that we are having those discussions, and I know that the staff has been, addressing those and also talking with other individuals with regards to that piece. But I don't have the critical data to be able to answer that fully right now. So that's something that we'll have to follow back up on. That way we can provide the information for that question.
Absolutely. All right. Now we had a couple questions as well about what happens if the bond doesn't pass. Is there a plan B? What would the city do if the bond doesn't pass in November?
Well, I think the number one thing that we could all say is that we will fulfill our obligation for public safety for the city of Kyle. Now, I know that in their current location, we are going to experience some issues as we continue to grow. At this point, we are finding it hard to find space to house our officers, to house the equipment that's needed and necessary to keep up with the growth. The plan B would, in considerations of what we have now, would have to really go back. We would have to do some research and some data to see how we could either retrofit the current location. I know there's been some other alternatives in our current facilities, how we could customize those areas to address our police department and its continued growth. But I believe that those are just very temporary band-aids again. At some point, we're going to need a facility to house and utilize in a space that consolidates all the resources together for efficiency. To utilize and make our best responses to public safety throughout the city. One of the things that I think it's important to understand in law enforcement is to be able to consolidate those places, to be able to have a facility that really serves the needs not only of the citizens, but also supports the staff that is working there in our city. I think that's very, very important, that they feel supported. Because I believe that a supported officer with all the resources that they need is going to be important for overall public safety.
Thank you. We have a couple questions about what programs will be included in the new building. And I touched on that a little bit when you were talking about the EOC, but can you talk about really what kind of community programs are going to benefit the citizens?
I think to having the facility in the space, the programs like the Explorer program for children coming in or adolescents coming in and learning and operating within our organization is a critical piece, because our current curriculums within our local high schools have taken the extra effort in partnership with the needs of our community in a lot of the CTE courses. They focus on law enforcement. These are opportunities for future leaders in law enforcement and public safety to come forward. So an Explorer program is one of those. Crime prevention programs for our facilities, not only for residents, but also businesses, to mitigate and prevent various types of crimes at each of those locations. I think having a space for those types of programs are critical. Programs such as victim rights advocacy for individuals that have experienced a traumatic situation, such as assault, sexual assault, or abuse. I mean, those are also programs that will expand into this building as well. Those are the things that we feel like, and with the community providing information and feedback from the community, are things that are necessary and needed to ensure that not only are we responding, but we're educating our community. And then not only are we educating them for prevention and different ways to promote safety within their different environments, but also the opportunity to engage the community to come in and meet our department and our city officials, so they can learn how we operate. So we also have the Citizens on Patrol program that is continuing to increase. We have benefited by a strong group of individuals that are very, very visible and helpful to our department, but also are the face of our departments to our citizens in many different aspects of law enforcement, public safety, and just community engagement. Our Citizens Police Academy, it continues to grow. We continue to increase opportunities for that academy. And those are also programs that will continue to increase.
Thank you. Can you tell us, we have this question a couple times, so I want to throw it out there for you. Is City Council going to be moving into this building?
No, City Council is remaining here, or remaining at City Hall for the general meetings. But I do know that there may be opportunities for us to utilize some of those spaces for any kind of planning and for meetings that we may have that may need to take place in increased space for various types of presentations, various types of planning. So, you know, although it's a city building for prescribed use, we're Team Kyle, and Team Kyle opens up their doors for the overall success of the city of Kyle and the citizens of the city.
Thank you. One of the questions we got is, did the city of Kyle issue a request for proposal?
Yes, we did. And the selection that we received was through PGAP. There were several individuals that submitted, and the selection was PGAP.
Thank you. All right, we'll keep going down here. We've got a couple questions about response times, but specifically, what part of town requires the most police responses? And if you don't have that answer, we can always follow up with Chief Barnett, but thought I'd ask you.
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting question, right? That's based on data. I wish I had the data in front of me and I could tell you where those response times are. But, you know, we get a balance of calls across the city for many different reasons. But I believe that would be left best to the chief to answer that question, or to respond with the data that shows exactly where our responses are.
Thank you. All right. One of our other questions are cost comparisons available for building part of the facility and then adding more later?
I think this is a completed building. There is quite a bit of space, and what we've done is to efficiently use the building. We've added programming in there for, you know, city offices and other departments that come into that building. As the department, the city police department grows, we will continue to consume the remaining pieces as it grows. This is for public safety. We're obligated for public safety, but in the meantime, there's much needed space in other areas, and that would allow the city to utilize space in a beautiful building, but also create more time for us to start redirecting for other areas as uses continue to be needed and as the growth of the city comes.
Thank you. One of our other questions is if the new building will include a drug awareness task force. Well,
you know, I think the task force, the drug task force, or the regional drug task force, is a collaboration between the county and the municipalities, and then also state resources in our particular area. They work together and they collaborate on those particular things on the drug task force. But for the overall education, which is another need for our community, is to, if we're talking about community education on various different issues with drugs in our city, but also safety, and then the appropriate way to discard those things. And I think that's one of the other programs with regards to crime prevention and education for our citizens is something that would come forward for them. But overall, drug task force is something that our law enforcement partners work together with the city of Kyle to address any issues. They utilize local resources. They'll utilize state resources and federal resources when necessary.
Right. Along those lines of the different organizations we have, the different departments, we had a question, do we have a citizen police oversight committee?
You know, we currently do not. And I know in our most recent charter review, there have been creation of some, some accountability issues that are coming in our other bond. There's some real good data on that. I know it'll be coming forward in the same time period that this bond comes forward. And we can provide that information and the details of what we're implementing within our charter to address community engagement, to commit to community engagement. I think that's important that people know that not only are we building a building and we're talking about different programs, but we have a charter that we have updated and we have implemented some critical pieces to ensure the accountability of oversight, but also the accountability of community engagement in how we do and what we do as a police department.
We also had a question along the lines of community engagement, is if there will be availability for community groups to hold meetings and events within the new Public Safety Center.
I think that's a critical piece for us when we talk about a community public safety center. That's what it's about, is engaging the community and bringing those organizations in to have those meetings. Because I believe what it does is it bridges that relationship, not only with our city officials, but also our community. It keeps the lines of communication open. And it's an opportunity to share with them, the needs. And a lot of times with that communication and with that engagement, it also facilitates a change in how we direct our policy and how we direct our response. So I think that's going to be a critical piece, and plenty of room and space and resources to be able to take those types of meetings on. Absolutely.
Great. We had a question about will residents and businesses all be taxed the same rate?
Well, I believe that the rate is across the board for all people in the city, and I don't think there's a change on that particular rate, but you got to remember that the valuations are different across the board. So I think that's what changes the actual cost between individuals. So we gave you guys an average cost across the board, and that's what the cost rate is for everyone in the city of Kyle at this point.
All right, thank you. And I know we're coming up on 8 o'clock, and for those of you who are attending, we want to make sure we have a couple of exit poll questions we want to get out before the end of our presentation. And so, Councilmember Villalobos, I'll go ahead and ask our last question about the EOC. We got a question, isn't there currently an EOC in the new KFD building?
Well, yes, that is a location that we use in the interim. I think the county uses that in the interim for countywide emergency management. But that is not a city facility. That is part of the Kyle Fire Department. They use that for their training and their facilities and planning. They are gracious enough to allow the county to use it as an EOC whenever we do have incidents happen countywide. But this particular location and this particular EOC not only would address city issues, but also would collaborate and at least take the strain off of the Kyle Fire Department with regards to overall emergency management response to incidents within the city and in the county. So yes, they're gracious enough to allow us to use that building, but there definitely is a need in the city to expand and to add all of the technology that it requires to have a state-of-the-art emergency operations center with all of the resources, all the technology, and then all the space and communications that's necessary for a top-tier EOC. Thank you again for your input and joining us this evening. Have a great night, and thank you for being here, and thank you for participating.